buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the audio-only live stream, links to our podcast, which is available on CastBox, Stitcher, Apple Tunes, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google, and, of course, Spotify. And links to our social media site, where we simulcast the radio show every day on the internet, on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Also, of course, broadcasting live. Since it is a simulcast, we are broadcasting it live on the radio, plain old terrestrial radio, right here on your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello and good morning to you. Hump day, middle of the week. Boy, we slogged right into this, didn't we? It took us... I mean, again, the best thing about a 3-day weekend is the 4-day work week that passes behind it. Here we are, Wednesday. We could see the downhill slide to Firearms Friday, and we are ready to go. All right, what is on today's program? Well, we got some good stuff here planned for you. In just a few moments, we're going to be diving into it with the big question. Representative Kevin McCabe is going to join us and answer some questions, some pointed questions about the end of the session and the special session and his vote, which has raised the ire of a lot of the listenership, and he's coming on board. God love him. He reached out and said he wanted to come on and have the discussion, so we're going to do that this morning and talk with him about the vote, about the end of the session, about what happened during the special session, the road projects and other things that were dangled out there, the vote that took place, and then what is going to happen in the coming session, the second half here in January. What is that going to look like, and what does he see that the actions of today, what the effect that's going to have down the road? So we'll have that conversation with Kevin McCabe here in just a few moments, starting at about 24 after or so. And we'll ask those questions and get answers. We'll get some answers and figure out what's going on. Then in hour 2, Elijah Verhagen is going to be joining us. He was a former candidate for the Senate up in the interior, and he has been very busy since he has gone through the elections and lost to the incumbent Click Bishop. And he has been working on an initiative, a ballot proposition to create term limits for the legislature. And so he's going to come on board with us and talk about that here this morning in hour 2. And we'll get the straight dope from him on that and continue on into that discussion. So that's the rundown for today. Meanwhile, this morning we'll start off with just a few headlines and see what is we'll see what goes on in your mind here as we go through this. A couple different things that stuck out at me. First and foremost, an iconic, I think it's iconic. I know people in Fairbanks, I guess it's because it's iconic to me because I remember I have memories with this, and I'm talking about the Polaris building in downtown Fairbanks. Now, if you've never been to Fairbanks, the Polaris is one of the tallest structures in downtown Fairbanks. It's been there since the 50s, and it was originally built as an apartment, and then it became a hotel. And there was a restaurant on top of it, the Tiki Cove. For those of you who don't remember, that's where my memories come from. I remember I took my prom date up there to the Tiki Cove and had dinner up there. Well, I had dinner up there several times, but that's one of the more memorable ones as we went up there. But the Polaris restaurant in 2000, or the Polaris Hotel rather, in 2001. They had a big water main break. It was and they flooded the basement with like 800,000 gallons of water or something. And the following year it was abandoned. They just basically shuttered up and said, nope, we're done. And the city of Fairbanks foreclosed on it for unpaid property taxes. And there it sat for 20 years. What were they going to do with this building? Mold, mildew, all kinds of problems. The building, again, built in the 50s, had plenty of stuff, including asbestos and more. They have now started the demolition. There was a $10 million earmark from Lisa Murkowski because the building contained PCBs, which is polychlorinated biphenyls. That apparently is a very dangerous material that apparently is killing us all. But the EPA was part of the reason that they got this $10 million earmark. So they're going to tear the whole building down, and they're going to ship all the materials of the building out of state for disposal. It's not going to be just, I can't even imagine what the shipping costs on something like that is going to be. You've got what is it, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12. It's a 10 or 11 story building, and you're going to ship every bit of it outside. Can't even imagine what the costs on that are going to be. Anyway, $10 million is what the city is paying to have it torn down, and it's going to be shipped outside, and there'll be a big gaping empty wound in the heart of Fairbanks. But many people have been fighting for this for a long time, and to try and get it taken down and utilized. I'm kind of sad. I mean, it's not that. I mean, you weren't going to do anything with the building, right? I mean, it's a hot mess. I agree with that, and but it is kind of sad when you see a bit of your memories get knocked down like that and crumbled. And but it's the beginning of a new era. The beginning of a new era in Fairbanks, and I'm sure they'll build a parking structure there or something. They'll do something with it. I don't know if there's any plans with what's going on, but since the city owns that whole, I mean, it's almost what is it, like half a city block, I guess. It's from second to third, or first to second rather, and halfway down Lacey Street. So I imagine that it is. I imagine it's probably about a half of a full city block. I guess we'll see what goes up there. I don't know what the plans are, but I just saw that picture, and the fact that the demolition had started. I saw last week a video of former Mayor Jim Matherly taking a sledgehammer to one side of the bricks on the building where it was the ceremonial knocking down start of the whole thing. But it's official. It's coming down. The Polaris is going to be gone. So, oh man, such good food. The Tiki Cove. It's amazing. Just so good. All right. So that's my bit of nostalgia for today. The second piece that caught my eye, again, just reminds me of the whole situation with schools and the madness and everything else. And this whole gender inequity thing that's going on. The state of Alaska is now proceeding with plans to discuss whether or not transgender students can participate in sports of the sex with which they identify, meaning boys who thinks they're girls can now participate in girls' sports, even though they have a biological They have a biological advantage in many of these cases, with strength and stamina and size and all that kind of stuff. On June 8th, the State Board of Education is going to consider a regulation, according to the Alaska Beacon, that would bar transgender student athletes from participating in school sports and activities under their gender identity. It would limit the students to either a co-ed multi-gender sports team or separate teams for each sex with participation based on the student's sex assigned at birth, meaning if you were born a boy or born a girl. And what's interesting about this is that here's what I'm surprised about this whole thing. I am surprised that there are not more feminists or, female equality, you know what I mean? People going for equal right. I'm surprised they're not more up in arms about this, because there is, again, stereotypically and in general, men physiologically are stronger, larger, have more physical stamina than women. It's just, it's why you have it's why you've got the NBA and the WNBA, right? They're two separate areas of sports because they are competing differently and on different levels, not because one is better than the other. It's just it's a physiological thing. It's a physical thing. And I am just shocked as hell that more and more feminists are not coming out to protect, especially in the high school and the collegiate level athletes. Why aren't you protecting your sisters, the females, for women's empowerment, against these biological males who come in and have been sweeping up in the powerlifting, the swimming, and all these other, rugby and all these other sports? Why wouldn't you be up in arms about that? I just don't understand. Well, anyway, the state of Alaska is going to put it out. The board, the decision on June 8th is unlikely to be final. The board is only going to be voting on whether or not to advance the proposal to a 30-day public comment period. A yes vote means the board would consider the public comment, then approve or reject the regulation. A no vote would kill it in the short term. Now, the ASSA, the Alaska Scholastic Sports Association, anyway, they deferred, the ASAA, rather, the Alaska School Activities Association. They had considered putting a statewide policy together, but then later deferred it to wait for action by the state because the state has more horsepower than they do and everything else. And of course, the usual suspects and the progressive side are out there basically saying that this was expected, but they're going to fight it. They're going to fight it because the children. So I look at this and I just go, again, I'm very glad that I didn't have to put my kids through the ringer on all this kind of crazy madness that's going on out there. But June 8th is the day. Public notice was published on Sunday about this. June 8th is the day that they're going to hold the decision, and I guess we'll see what the outcome of that is as well. All right, well, coming up, we got Kevin McCabe going to be joining us here in a minute, and we're going to talk with him, see what's going on, and we will continue our discussions. It is the Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more in just a moment. Don't forget, Elijah Verhagen joins us in hour 2. We'll return right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good morning. Hello. How are you guys doing this morning? How are you doing? Wow. You guys have been chatty this morning. Yeah, it is a little cold, like 41 degrees here at the house this morning. I'm like, isn't this supposed to be over? I'm just saying. All right. Well, welcome to the 6 o'clock club here this morning, and good morning to all of you here who got stuff going on. Jeffrey's got his wood stove cooking this morning. Probably could need that. It is, again, a little chilly burr. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Bill says, good on you, Kevin. I haven't totally lost faith in you yet. No, I don't think you should. We can all disagree or agree to disagree, but I don't think we should lose faith yet. Was Alaska even a state when you went to the prom, says Chris? Oh, damn, son. That hurts. That was in the 80s, okay, man? The prom was like 1986 or something. I am not older than dirt. All right. Was Alaska even a state when you went to the prom? I hate you so much right now. Okay. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'm hoping summer falls on a weekend this year, says Jeffrey. Oh, man. Alaska doesn't have the facility to dispose of the PCBs. There's a good construction debris disposal site in Salter. Wonder why they aren't going there with the debris, says Brian. I don't know. They have a contract. I mean, the building is coming down right now. That's going on. Okay. TERFs are real. They are speaking out. They are just a minority voice in their subculture. TERFs. What is the TERF? Tell me what the TERF is. TERF, Chris. Maybe you should share some of your common sense. Okay. All right. Is it public testimony? No, Kelly, it's not. It's not public testimony. Anthony says radical feminism spends a generation spouting about toxic masculinity and equality. Next generation of males goes trans and takes over feminism. Way to reset the progress to zero, people. I mean, that's exactly what my thoughts were. I'm like, wait, you guys have been going on and on about this, and all of a sudden the guys take up the banner as women, and now you're silenced. You're silenced. Just like, wow. Okay. Okay. There, I'm just going through all this question. Zero tolerance, stand up about. Okay. Trans exclusionary radical feminism. Okay. Well, there you go. That's what they need. BJ Campbell has an excellent discussion on the turf wars. I've got to get BJ on the program. He actually reached out to me, which I'm excited to talk about. We'll see if we can get him on for Firearms Friday. All right, let's get about a minute out here before we get jumped into. So we're going to talk with Kevin McCabe, who joins us this morning in the chat room, is ready to go. Good morning, my friend. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Michael. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm a little chilly, man. I don't understand. It's like 40 freaking degrees here. It's supposed to be summer, I thought. But here we are.
It is just cold. 8 inches of snow in Glen Allen, I heard.
8 inches of this is after the flooding, right? I mean, this is just what they needed. 8 inches of snow after weeks of flooding and wiping out the whole place. So, well, that's life in Alaska. If you're not, you don't like the weather, just wait 15 minutes. It'll change on you. All right. Well, we're going to jump back into it here. Kevin, hold the line. We'll continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like and share, like and follow, do all the YouTube-y things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get ready to rock and roll. Here we go. Doing it right now. Okay, welcome back to the program. Wednesday edition of the show. We're doing some of our post-session cleanup, I guess. Just kind of getting, what do they call that? The after-action review, the debrief on what was going on, what happened. Joining us this morning to discuss it is Representative Kevin McCabe from down here in the Mat-Su. Kevin is my representative in the Alaska legislature, and he comes on board to talk with us quite frequently. This morning, of course, we're going to talk about that final couple days of the session itself, and then the one-day surprise special session that almost ended before it began, and the kind of the vote that has raised the ire of some folks. And Kevin has explained it a little bit in some emails, both to the constituency and then to me personally, and we've talked about it. But he wanted to come on and let's have some further discussion on it, and he joins us right now. Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Good morning. How are you, Michael?
You know, again, I was just saying it's a little chilly burr, but I mean, I don't know, maybe I need to put a wood stove at the studio. I'm feeling a little chill this morning. It's supposed to be summer, and I keep waiting for that. I think somebody made the perfect comment in the chat room during the commercial break. Then he said, "I hope summer falls on a weekend this year," and I'm just like, "Yeah, exactly. I hope it falls on a week. I had exactly 10 minutes of sunshine this weekend." And we made sure to get outside in it for the full 10 minutes. I feel pretty lucky. Kevin, of course, this session was contentious. We knew it was going to be from the very beginning. We could see it from the election time, the makeup, the formation of the majorities. We knew this was going to be a painful session. For those of us who are, we're in a minority here, and we've come to accept that here on the program, that we're in a minority that wants smaller, more limited government. We want it to live within its means. We want it to pay the full PFD and yet still do all these other things. We knew it was going to be painful, but it was really more than we really even bargained for, right down to the end. So let's first talk about those last few days of the session after the House had transmitted their budget to the Senate. And they kept waiting with bated breath for the Senate to do the same. And of course, that didn't happen. So walk us through the last few days here of the regular session before we dive into the special session component of it.
Sure. Well, we transmitted the budget, the operating budget, a month before the end of the session. We did so in good faith. We remembered as a minority 2 years ago when we didn't transmit the budget because it took 30 days to form. Remember my very first session, it took us 30 days. The whole COVID thing was going on, and we were 2020, and we had several votes on the floor trying to elect a speaker, and it took us 30 days before we formed the House, 30 days of a 90 or 120 day session. And the Senate had threatened at one point that they were going to do their own budget. And so with that in mind, we transmitted the budget in good faith, thinking, hey, we're doing a good thing here. We're working pretty good with the Senate, even though we're not real sure of the makeup of the Senate. So we transmitted the budget. We held it for 2 weeks. It was ready to go for 10 days to 2 weeks before we finally transmitted it. And so that sort of started us down this process, which was very painful. The way it's supposed to work is we give them the operating budget. They're supposed to give us their capital budget. We each have our own input into the budgets, and then at the end of the day, we come together and pass a budget. So that includes. Remember, the Constitution says 1/3 of our budget is supposed to be capital projects. So all of that is supposed to meld together at the end, and unfortunately, the Senate opted not to transmit a capital budget to us. And they asked us repeatedly, well, what do you want? Well, what do you want? Like we are the children, and we're just supposed to tell them what we want, and then they'll put it into a budget for us. And that was unacceptable to us. We wanted our own input. We wanted our own debate. We wanted it in our committees and finance committee. And, that's going into it. That's what we said to each other. We're a non-binding caucus. However, everybody will have input into the budget. Everybody, all 23 of us in this non-binding caucus will have input into the budget, whether it be operating budget, capital budget. And then all of a sudden, the Senate took half of that away, which was a problem for us. So coming down to the last few days, it became painfully obvious that the Senate was going to hold on to it until the last possible moment. We thought 2 years ago and a year ago that time compression as a weapon was, we had sort of seen it all, and little did we know that we hadn't even seen the nuclear option, if you will, which was holding on to it until there was 6 hours left in the session. So
Right. It left you, I basically, again, painted the whole House of Representatives into a corner. And it was being done on purpose. We obviously know that because, again, they kept coming to you saying, well, what do you want in it? We'll put it in for you, kind of thing. The traditional method of this, as you said, is that usually in each session it swaps, right? One session, the House has the capital budget. The next session, the Senate has it swaps back and forth every session. And then you guys are supposed to trade and then come together in either concurrence or creating a conference committee. That's the tradition, right? That's what the rules call for.
I'm not sure if that's the way the rules. It seems to me that the operating budget starts always in the House, and the capital budget starts always in the Senate. That's why the Senate has control of CAPSIS pretty much the whole time. So I don't think it necessarily swaps. The control of the conference committees swaps every time.
Okay.
Right.
But that's the tradition, right? The tradition
Right.
is one side has it. They pass them back and forth. We're done with ours. We give it to you. You give you ours. We either concur or we create a conference committee that hammers out the details of what we can agree on. That's been the tradition, and that's been the procedure. And this basically has abrogated that whole procedure. They apparently wanted to control the whole process and not have a conference committee at all. That was kind of the whole point here.
That's absolutely correct. They didn't want a conference committee. They don't want to conference the capital budget. And, unfortunately, with a non-binding caucus, we have to have input. That's our agreement. Everybody, all 23 of us have to have input. I had much input into it very early on, into the capital projects that I wanted and that were on the table and that were negotiated, some very important stuff. As you know, Talkeetna Water and Sewer, Wasilla Airport, KGB Road, Vine Road. There's a bunch of, Bogard Road at Angstrom, Moose Creek Bridge, Palmer Fish Hook Road and Trunk Road roundabout. There were a bunch of things in there that the Valley delegation was very interested in seeing completed or fixed, or that had issues that we had talked about in our finance committee and talked about very early on through the CAPSIS program. And, when we finally did get the operating budget from the Senate, none of those were in there. It was zero. The capital budget, which is supposed to be a third of the budget constitutionally, was zero. And so the problem is, when you go to a conference committee, you can't add to the budget. So we would be negotiating from a position of zero. So the capital budget wouldn't even really necessarily, unless we did something weird, which is not unusual, but for this legislature, we would have been starting from zero and we wouldn't be able to add to the capital budget. So the Senate transmitted very early who they're, which is also abnormal. Normally, you don't assign a conference committee till after the budgets are going to the conference. But the Senate, in their waning moments of their regular session, announced their conference committee, certainly in an attempt to intimidate us. And the conference committee was Senator Olson, Stedman, and Hoffman, the same three tri-chairs of their Senate Finance Committee. So now we look at that and we know that we can only assign 2 of our majority members to the conference committee and 1 of our minority members in the House. So it essentially would have been 4 to 2 in the conference committee. So that was playing on all of our minds. And we had much discussion in caucus. Everybody was talking. We had hours and hours of, and I can't, our agreement is not to tell what goes on in the caucus, but I can certainly tell you what I said. I argued up until the last 5 minutes that we should absolutely 100% all vote no. We needed to send a strong message to the Senate that this was unacceptable. And that was my walking out the door of our caucus. That was my position. Unfortunately, it wasn't everyone else's position. And in the vote, I had to have a fallback position. I had to actually vote for those things that I negotiated. Once the strong caucus position, 21 people telling the Senate that we were dissatisfied and very angry, thinking about the conference committee, thinking about last year's conference committee where we lost 7 trooper positions in the Valley, and thinking about how much time I had spent negotiating on all these projects. Once my strong caucus position and strong caucus vote was gone, I had to vote for the projects I negotiated for. So
one of the other interesting aspects in their last minute maneuvering, including the naming of their conference committee positions, was they also included a $40 million provision to continue to pay salaries for people who were, if the government shutdown occurred. I mean, they were like setting the whole thing up, trying to force the hand. And it, again, well played, I guess, by the Senate. They have Bert Stedman and company have basically got this thing wired tight. They know exactly what to do, what buttons to push, and everything else. They were trying to set this up, I think, and to basically cut off all avenues of escape through either the conference committee, and even if there was a potential shutdown, trying to cover their collective butts on that as well. That's a very unusual position.
Well, I agree with Senator Schauer. This was ordained or put into play last summer before the elections even happened, this strategy. And certainly it's unfortunate because you would think that we would be able to work together with the number of Republicans in the Senate, but we're going to have a strategy going into January. There's just no two ways about it. We're going to have a number of meetings with our caucus if it survives this, and figure out a strategy to move forward and how to deal with a Senate that's not as friendly as we thought they were, based on the number of Republicans over there. So,
well, yeah, I think we should stop. Breaking up the legislature by party, because at this point, party doesn't matter. What you've got is, instead of identifying with the animal on your lapel, you need to look at these people and decide, are these people pro-private sector or pro-public sector? That's really the breakdown of the legislature these days. Party has nothing to do with it. Is it pro-private sector or is it pro-public sector? That's really the definition between the two sides right now in the state legislature.
Sure. I think Ben Carpenter mentioned that on your program, months and months ago, that it's no longer Democrat or Republican. It's big government versus small government.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're coming up on the break. We're going to take it just a bit early because I want to break down the session vote, and then I want to talk about what's going to happen in the second half. Here in your mind, you just touched on it a bit, but we're going to continue here in just a moment. Kevin McCabe is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with more and Representative Kevin McCabe right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're in the break right now. Kevin McCabe is our guest. We're talking about the session and things like this. I think this is a legitimate question. Kevin, you say you saw this strategy coming a year ago, but you weren't able to do anything to set this right. I mean, you saw this right after you said that Stedman and company were setting this up from the very get-go. Did you not anticipate your fellow coalition members capitulating? Or, I mean, what could have been done in hindsight? Of course, hindsight's perfect, right? So what could you have done in hindsight to stop this if you saw this coming, so to speak? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me unmute you. That's me. I muted you. So there you go. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. So, I mean, in retrospect, I shouldn't have said I saw it coming. I think what I said is Senator Schauer said on your show the other day that, in his opinion, they had been planning this since last summer. The Senate had. I didn't necessarily see it. In fact, I thought that we were going to get more Republicans elected. I would have thought Tuckerman Babcock had a good shot, and so I didn't necessarily see it. But there were others in the Senate looking back on it that saw or that planned this. What could we have done about it? With a non-binding caucus and without going through what we just went through and seeing how we were treated, we probably could have done nothing about it. We probably wouldn't have been able to come up with a strategy, because there were people, and there are people still in our non-binding caucus that don't necessarily think that the Senate did much wrong. So that's that's just the way it looks with this caucus. As close as we are it'd be different if we had 27 full-blown conservative small government Republicans to work with, but we don't. We have a mix of people, and we don't quite have exactly what we need to move forward with the very conservative vote. So we have to negotiate.
Is it, and I got to ask the question, because we just talked about it, that you thought, you being the majority in the House, thought that because they were Republicans, you thought that they would be more sympathetic to your causes or your beliefs or your strategy or whatever. How much of this has to go back to the parties, to the feet of the party, to say, we need to be asking some deeper questions about our candidates that are being endorsed and are getting monies and doing all this from the party? I mean, if the party platform, which is supposed to be smaller, more limited government, continues to be thrown by the wayside, how much of this needs to be laid at the feet of the party to say, we shouldn't be endorsing, or maybe we should be seeking out alternative candidates that are more loyal to the party platform itself, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, this is just Kevin's opinion, but I think it's almost 100%. In my opinion, the party has failed, and the districts have failed in their jobs. It's not the district's jobs to send resolutions and to drive legislation when we're in session. The Republican Party districts, it's their job to find and vet candidates that will advance what they believe. If you have a very conservative district, such as my district, they find and they vet a candidate and then send him to, get him elected and send him to Juneau. That's the district's job. It's not the district's job to send a bunch of resolutions to, threatening or whatever. At the end of the day, their job is to get conservatives elected, and they're not fundraising. They're not holding debates. None of them are. Out of all the districts that are out there, I don't think any of them held any debates. Maybe on the Kenai somewhere there was a debate held by a district, but certainly not in my district. The debates have to be held by the Chamber of Commerce's or the women's clubs, but certainly not the districts. And the districts should be out calling and fundraising and vetting candidates, asking them. When I first got elected, I had to sit in front of the district 3 years ago and say and give my responses to all of the Republican Party platform. The guy ran again didn't have to do that, but so I think we need a viable procedure as Republicans and conservatives to properly vet candidates. But that's sort of just my opinion.
Well, I mean, it's hard when the party itself doesn't even seem to be penalizing people who are, again, blatantly violating the platform. Again, of a smaller, more limited government, with a whole system that's disconnected from the when the public and private economies are disconnected from each other, as we've talked about with Rob Meyer. All right, well, hold on the line here, Kevin. We're going to come back to you here in just a second. We're going to get back into it here and continue the Michael Duke Show. Please, if you haven't liked and followed the show or subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube, if you do that, that would be great. That would be a good thing. I would appreciate that. We're going to continue right now. Common Sense Radio. Okay, we're continuing now. Kevin McCabe is our guest, GOP state rep for the Mat-Su. And we're talking about the final days of session, and now we're going into the special session itself. It was a surprise. It was one day. We got a vote for concurrence right away. And, Kevin, you have written about why you voted the way you voted, because you said you were a no vote right out the door, right up until the minute that it hit the floor. And then when you saw that there wasn't going to be enough votes to stop the concurrence, you decided to vote for it. And you said because it was about relationships and you negotiated some stuff, and we got $10 million worth of stuff in the capital projects budget for the Mat-Su, and that you had to vote for that in that way. So give me that real quick, because I'm gonna tell you why I disagree with you, but I want you to be able to have your say first as to why you did it in your own words. So I'm not fumbling it here.
Sure. Well, it's it's a little bit more than that. So last year and 2 years ago, Frank, some of the discussion. I would say, the Big Lake Road, we need Big Lake Road, but I don't want you to hold it hostage. And the answer always came back from the senators, well, you're not going to vote for the budget anyway, so why would we care about you? The 7 trooper positions that were removed in the conference committee last year. I said, well, why were those removed? And they said, well, you're not going to vote for the budget anyways because you're a full PFD guy. So why would we care about you, Kevin? Why would we care about KGB Road? Why would we care about the Hollywood and Vine roundabout? Why would we care about Bogart Road, Big Lake Road, Church Road pavement, some of the roads up north? Why would we care about those? You're going to vote no on the budget anyways. So, that's playing through my mind. The conference committee's playing through my mind. There's lots of things that they weren't necessarily bribes, but they were things that I negotiated, put into CAPSIS, talked to the senators about, talked about how they were important. I think somebody in the chat room was laughing yesterday about how the Talkeetna sewer and water couldn't compare to school funding. And, I can't disagree more. I mean, there's 1,199 people in Talkeetna that are suffering because of the E. coli in the water. And they've been excluded from village safe water for years because they're seen as not a village because they don't have native connotation, an off the road system. And they're sort of seen as a tourist village that really doesn't have a place in the Village Safe Water Act. So they've been excluded from the Village Safe Water Act by definition, by the population definition, for decades. And they've had water problems for decades. When their river floods and it floods out all their septic systems and the sewer system, nobody seems to care. But when there's a village in interior off the road system that floods and they have an issue, we have an emergency declaration. So I wanted to solve the Talkeetna water and sewer problem. And I have a bill in to do that, to change the Village Safe Water Act that's headed to the Senate. So I have lots of things at play here with the Senate, at least 2 bills in the Senate right now, waiting for a vote, waiting for the Senate to hear them, as well as all I'm also being derided for the snow track funding. That I didn't put in any bill for that. That's already in the budget. What I did do is change it from DNR to DOT to get it away from the DNR who wants to use the snowmobile licensing money for the long trail. So we're taking licensing money from licensing a vehicle, a motorized vehicle, and we're going to spend it on a trail that has no ability for motorized vehicles. So that's what I did with the snow track funding. I get a lot of hassle over that. Where you just want money for the trails in Big Lake, and that money's already there. It's nothing that I did. It's been there since 1996. So I just want to move it from one department to another. So anyways, lots of things in the air, lots of balls in the air. I get that, the message to the Senate was the stronger message. I totally agree with that. Had my caucus agreed with that, I would have been right there. I would have been the 21st vote. That's why I specifically waited. You can watch the vote. I am the last person to vote.
Well, this is what gets me. First of all, you were the last person to vote, so it was going to pass anyway. So that was the one question. If it was going to pass anyway, it would have seemed from a purely political standpoint, it would have been better to vote against it for that reason, just to be able to stand your ground on the whole PFD issue, because now they've taken 75% of the PFD moving forward. That's the big thing. But the whole thing that got me on this whole thing was the abrogation of the process. The process, which is we pass our budget to you, you pass our budget to us. We either concur or we have a conference committee, we work it out. Even if in the end, and it gone through conference committee and the budget was actually worse, I would have been better with that than the fact that we basically gave in to, it was a hostage negotiation or terrorist situation or whatever you want to say. We basically rewarded them for bad behavior. We have rewarded them for abrogating the process by agreeing to it and given them more leverage to know, oh, this works. So we'll do it again. We can expect probably moving forward that this will continue to happen. And that was my biggest problem with this, Kevin. I understand your rationale for what you're talking about. The different projects and the things, and yes, holding KGB hostage. I live on KGB. I've seen how bad that road is. The Talkeetna thing, all those things. Again, legitimate concerns, but at the same time, they basically submarined and tore asunder the entire process. And a yes vote, in my mind, is a quiescent, okay, and nod and a wink. Okay, that's fine. You can do that. And I agree with it, kind of thing. And that's what bugs me about this. Not even the setting the monetary portions of the budget aside, the fact that we gave the thumbs up to the abrogation of the process through this is what really killed me. And especially since you were the last vote, you knew it was going to pass anyway. You could have done it as a protest at that point.
Sure, and I don't disagree with that, but I looked at it and said, is this going to be a futile protest? Is it going to matter? Is my vote going to send a message to the Senate or not? If it had mattered, if I was the 21st vote and we went to conference, the Senate's answer was, well, we'll see you in 27 days, and we're going to do the same exact thing. So I didn't think that the protest was worth losing my ability to negotiate in the bills that I have in the Senate as well, and my ability to negotiate for next year. So, and I can't tell you, Michael, the number of people that have come up to me and said, thank you for passing the budget. We don't like special sessions. I'm like you guys. I'm in this chat room all the time. I'm as conservative as you are. Unfortunately, that's not the same out in the real world. In many places in Wasilla, I've had more people thank me for voting the way I did than give me a hassle about it. And I get that there's 60 to 100 people in here, between here and YouTube, that are as conservative as I do, and they don't agree with the vote. But I am telling you, you were exactly right when you said we must be in the minority a couple months ago, because we are in the minority. Conservative, small government people right now are in the minority. I've said that on your show before. Out of the dozens and dozens of people that came into my office, there was one group, Americans for Prosperity, that came in and said, cut the budget. Everybody else wants money. So I have to represent 18,335 people, and the majority of them don't like special sessions. They agree that we need to get past. They said, yep, you lost. The Senate boxed you in the corner, you lost. So the best thing to do is move forward. Rip the Band-Aid off, if you will. That's another thing that I heard from many of my fellow caucus members, in discussions, not in caucus, but out in the hall. Hey, maybe it's time to rip the Band-Aid off, admit that we lost, move forward, and live to fight another day. That was another phrase. So do you lose the battle because you want to, or do you lose the war because you have to win the battle? Or do you think about next year, and do you think about how you are going to be perceived when you try to negotiate another project that it needs to be done next year? So that,
yeah. I mean, ultimately, I guess this will be decided, once the elections roll back around and everything else, that'll be decided. But I mean, it's frustrating. I understand why you took the votes. Intellectually, I understand it. I mean, I think your justifications are I think they are just. But at the same time, I'm glad I'm not a legislator, because I would have made the wrong call, according to you. I would have voted no. But that's just me, because I don't like people holding me hostage and holding me over a barrel, and then bribing me on the way out, kind of thing, to say, well, if you want these things, you got to do what I say, kind of thing. Final thoughts here, last couple minutes, the upcoming session. What does it look like? I mean, is this going to be a game of chicken right down to the end where nobody passes the budget to each other until the last 6 hours, and that's what it's going to look like? What do you think is going to happen here?
It certainly could be. A lot depends on if the caucus, if the House majority manages to hold together. There's lots of ideas out there, lots of people that they voted no based on my arguments, and they're very upset with me. They're very upset with 10 of us that voted yes. Although we knew going into, at least 5 of us were going to vote yes, which put the whole deal at risk. We knew that. We knew it was a very tenuous position. So the caucus is going to take some healing if we're going to move forward. Unfortunately, Kathy Tilton is the person to do it. And I think that ultimately we'll be fine, but we certainly do need a strategy going forward, whether it be holding on to the operating budget till we get the capital budget. But remember, 3 years ago, when we were forming, the Senate said, well, we'll just do our own operating budget. So if we hold on to the operating budget, what's the chances are that they're going to do their own? And then when they get ours, they're just going to put theirs into play. So there's a number of things we could do. We're talking about all of them. I don't want to transmit any of the strategy that's out there so far, but the House is not powerless, but we have to stay together, and we have to find a way to come to some agreement. When you have 23 disparate people, without a binding caucus, how do we agree on the best strategy going forward?
Kevin McCabe, our guest, the Michael Duke Show. We're out of time. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Thank you for being here. Back with more right after this. Well, Kevin, why don't we take a page out of their book if that's the case? Why doesn't the House create their own budget for the operating and the capital, if that's the case? I mean, if that's the next move, if the next move is the House retains their budget and holds onto it like the Senate does, and the Senate says, fine, we'll just make our own budgets. I mean, again, goose for the gander. We continue to get played by the Machiavellian moves of Stedman and company over there. I mean, if that's what we got to do, fight fire with fire. And if it ends up in a stalemate and we end up, coming up to a government shutdown because you can't do it, well, so be it, because that's part of the problem here. And I know that you've mentioned several times that this is what a non-binding caucus looks like. I don't think we need a binding caucus to blackmail people into doing the strategy. I mean, people got to recognize the right thing eventually. The Senate is, and somebody's got to call out. I mean, I know it's not collegial and everything else but I mean, some point you got to call people out and say, this is unethical. This breaks the rules. It breaks the tradition of the legislature. We're not supposed to be doing this. And that kind of stuff needs to be called out instead of just winking a nod and going along with it, because we're going to get something in the end out of it. That's the frustrating part of this whole thing from the outside looking in. I mean, I'm not there, luckily, because again, I would have made the wrong call apparently.
Well, so I couldn't agree with you more, but in fact, in my newsletter, I say I must express my disappointment and anger at the Senate's treatment of the House majority. Their process was reprehensible, completely undermining the budget process and denying the House an equal right to represent our districts. But when my people, the people in this chat room, spend all their time criticizing me and not reading the newsletter, trying to understand the process, it becomes a little bit of a futile exercise for me to put that together, because people don't read it. People don't take the time to try to understand. They just disagree completely. You've even seen messages in the chat room this morning that people that collude with the Democrats. Well, David Eastman voted with the Democrats many times. In fact, he was actually actively advising them, the Democrats in the House, against us, the Republican majority. So, I just don't know how to solve that when we spend more time shooting inward than we do shooting outward, if you will. So that's going to have to be an individual decision from constituents, I guess. If they want to support us and help us through this and find a path forward, that's great. If not, then we'll just continue to be the Republicans that we are and have the circular firing squad.
I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, I think, again, one of the major sticking points of this whole thing is the party not putting candidates in there because that's the thing. We've changed out, a full third of the legislature in the last few years. I mean, right? But unfortunately, we've got a handful of the same players that are in there pulling the levers of the machine because they know how to do it. They've been there for 20 years. They know the procedures and where they can apply pressure and what they can do. And they're winning at every turn. They're winning at every turn. You can go back over the last 5 years. You can look at the machinations and see that they've gotten everything that they've wanted. They've done almost every maneuver and gotten almost every single thing that they've wanted. And we've got to up our game. We've got to up our game on this if that's the case. And I don't know, fight fire with fire. Do we get sneaky and underhanded? What do we do here? Something's got to change because what's going on is not working.
Sure. And then, the true conservatives, we don't have the hive mentality that the big the big government Republicans and the big government Democrats do, where they all want to work together and create this big utopia. We're not like that. We all have our own individual ideas. We have our own way of doing things. And if we can't convince the other folks that have their own way of doing things and their own individual ideas of the process going forward, then how do we put it together? We absolutely need a strong leader. We need somebody that can bring all 23 of us together with the wildly disparate mentality that the 23 of us have in the cockpit or in the caucus, and try to lead us forward in some sort of cohesive manner. But it's going to take a lot of discussion and a lot of leadership. There's no doubt.
Well, we can only hope that the next half of the session looks different than this half of the session, because as we knew going in that it was going to be bad. It was going to be tough. I guess in the long run, we just didn't know how bad, how tough, how ugly it was going to be. Kevin, I appreciate you coming on. Again, I would have made a different decision, but I wasn't there. And so, again, while I respect your reasoning behind it, I still disagree with the final vote. But we'll see, I guess, how this plays out and what that means in the next session. Do they treat you nice in the next session because you did it the one time, or do they still treat you with disdain and dangle you in on the end of the hook out there, knowing that you're going to want more for your district and do the same thing over again? Again, that I guess we're going to have to wait and see how that plays out when it's all said and done.
Sure, I get that, and now they don't really know. I'm not pigeonholed. They don't know how I'm going to vote. So it would seem to me that they would approach Kevin with a little bit more of less of an idea that this is how he's going to vote anyways. He's going to vote against it anyways. Well, maybe not. Maybe I won't vote against it. And, at the end of the day, it's our job as legislators to pass a balanced budget. That's the whole reason we go down there. And we need to find a path forward. They need to find a path forward. They need to come to me and say, what's it going to take this time for you to vote for it, Kevin? And, maybe I have demonstrated that. Certainly hope so.
Well, I
Otherwise,
appreciate.
it was a waste.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate you coming on, Kevin. I mean, again, I think your heart's in the right place. I think you're trying to do well for your constituency. Again, I may not have made the same decision, but you've done it, and you're out there, and we'll see how it plays out. That's the bottom line. We're going to see how this plays out in the long run. Thank you for coming on board and joining us this morning, Kevin McCabe, our guest. Appreciate you being part of the program today.
Absolutely, thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you. Kevin McCabe with us here this morning on the program, getting ready to jump into it. Elijah Verhagen right now.
Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
On the world, on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska. If this is your favorite radio station and or FM translator, it is the Michael Dukes Show, hour 2 of the big radio broadcast for this hump day, Wednesday, middle of the week. Thank you for coming in and joining us. We just finished up with Kevin McCabe. Got a little long-winded there in the break, asking some more questions. Very frustrating position. I mean, I'll be honest with you, very frustrating position. I understand, as I said earlier, I understand all the justifications behind it. I understand the reasoning. I still think, again, the wrong call. And I mean, I would not have made that call. Again, this is probably why I would never make a good legislator for all those reasons. Because, again, I feel like the abrogation of the process was the biggest thing. But we'll move on from that. We're going to talk a little bit now about maybe a solution for fixing part of this problem. As we were saying earlier, we've changed out a third of the legislature in the last year, or in the last couple of years. We've changed out over a third of the legislature, yet we continue to have the same problems. And part of that is because we've got a group of folks, a small group of folks, who they know the system inside and out. They've got the institutional knowledge. They know where the proverbial bodies are buried, and they know how to work the system. And they've done that, and they've used that institutional knowledge and that 20 years of experience as a professional politician to be able to manipulate the system and to basically make everybody else kowtow to what they do. And part of that is because they've been there forever. And so we need to start to talk about something maybe that could fix part of this, and that would be term limits. Joining us now specifically about that is Elijah Verhagen, who is putting together or working on a ballot initiative, a ballot proposition that would create just that, term limits for the Alaska legislature, which, again, I couldn't think of a better way to do things. Elijah Verhagen joins us this morning to discuss it, and he's muted, but we'll talk with him right now. Good morning. How are you, Elijah?
Good. How are you, Michael? Good to talk to you.
Good. Thanks for coming on board and joining us this morning. Elijah, I mean, we were just talking about the absolute poo parade that this last session, the first half of the session was, and how, I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen in the second half of this session. I mean, it could be even worse with what's going on, because now everybody could hold on to their budgets or make their own or do whatever. And this is a mess in the making, again, of some of the maneuvering of these professional politicians who've been in the legislature for years. I know you fought back against this. This is why you tried to run for the Senate in this last go around. But that was a steep hill to climb. Obviously, you couldn't make it over the special interest money and everything else. So let's talk about state term limits and your thoughts on how it can fix the problem that we're dealing with and what efforts you're putting forward in this.
Yeah. So, and I was listening to your last little conversation there, and, I'm with you, Michael. Like, I would have voted no. It's just really frustrating when I feel like, the House was in a fight with a big bully, the Senate, And it's like, okay, for a little bit, you got a reprieve. They got the budget back. And within a day, all of a sudden, they, enough caved back into the bully, and then expecting the bully to be nice later. It just, I don't know. I've not seen that ever works out well for the person who's not the bully. So
Right.
anyways,
Well, I mean, that's the perfect analogy, because again, a bully, you can either, it's appeasement and you hope that they treat you well, or you punch them in the nose and they know that they're going to have to respect you. It's not that, you don't appease them and say, geez, I hope they treat me nice the next time around we meet, because you've already shown them that you're weak and willing to give into their appeasement. And that, I think, is the perfect analogy.
Yep. So yes, I have been working on this for a while. It's something that I've been thinking about for years, and not just me, but term limits has always, I feel like, been a popular topic, and not necessarily just among conservatives or Republicans. So this last go around, I was running for state senate. I knocked over 1,000 doors just myself, and I met a lot of people. Talking with them about all sorts of topics throughout the state, but one resounding, recurring topic that kept coming up was, man, we really need term limits, and we really do, because some of these, like you said, some of these politicians have been in there for over 20 years. Some of them, there's probably at least, I need to actually sit down and count them up, but there's probably at least 7 or 8 that have been in there over 20 years. And so making a career out of this, which they have, most of those right now are in the Senate, and most of them all just got their way. Most of the people that are really actually standing behind their constituents and are actually fiscal conservatives still and all these other things, they're not the people that have been in there for 20 years. So anyways, I've been really thinking about this, and after the campaign was over, I was like, we can talk all we want till we're blue in the face, but action is harder, but it needs to happen. And so what can we do? And so I got together with some other people that have ran for office and have been hearing the same thing. We've been talking about this. So I got together with Heath Smith down in Homer. He ran against Gary Stevens for Senate, and then I was talking with Trevor Shaw, a friend of mine from Ketchikan, who's also a true conservative and has helped out in the party a lot, and also ran years ago against Dan Ortiz. All of us have really heard over the past years from the people that we were hoping to represent how important term limits would be, and so we got together. We took a little bit of language from several different states that have passed state term limits, and we created an initiative that we now are right about to turn into the lieutenant governor's office. And what this would do, it's not term limits for people like Lisa Murkowski, we wish. Many people have asked me that, and we're like, nope, unfortunately, they're the ones that have to put it on themselves, or you have to go through a whole convention of states. But as much as I would love that, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about term limits on our state legislators, which is also very, very crucial and important in my opinion. And so what this would do is, after 12 consecutive years, any person who is serving in the House or the Senate for a cumulative 12 years will have to take a mandatory 6-year break. Now, a 6-year break, really, I feel like alone will dramatically improve or help solve the problem, because 6 years later, you lose a lot of name recognition. You don't have all the political or the financial funding that you've had when you're the incumbent for year after year after year. And therefore, if that person were to rerun 6 years later, if they really had done a really darn good job the past, 12 years earlier, 6 years earlier, then maybe they would be able to beat out at that point a 6-year incumbent. However, I feel like most would not. And so it's turning the legislature back into more of what it should be, which is a citizen legislature. It should not be a career, which so many have turned it into. And then after that 6 years has lapsed, if someone were to get reelected, they can serve another 8 years, is how we wrote it. And then they have a lifetime cap at 20 years. So that lifetime cap already would make, once enacted, would make a lot of these 20 plus year senators ineligible to run and be elected again or be appointed, or that wording is in there as well. So that alone would really, really fix the problem in our state of kumbaya Republicans joining Democrats like they've done over and over again at the expense of what the people that elected them were wanting and hoping. And then they, like you said, they know how to use the system very well inside and out. I've seen all sorts of stuff working as a staffer in Juneau, and sometimes it happens late at night when they're in a conference committee. And this time they didn't even go to a conference committee because they didn't want to lose potentially the numbers in the House with a battle in a conference committee. And so what they did this time was just, wow. It was sneaky, and it really hurt, in my opinion, the state and our people.
Well, and I think if you look at historically, I mean, the founding fathers never intended the job of a legislator, either at the national or the state level. They never intended it to be a career. They never intended it to be, I mean, these were doctors and lawyers and farmers and chemists and all these different, they wanted to go down, do the job of the people, and then get out and go back to work. And we've made it so lucrative and so, and again, people, there's a power component to this as well, where there's people out there who basically are just glomming onto power, and the more power they can control, the better that they are, and the more that they want, kind of thing. We're seeing that more and more, to where this has become up. I mean, I've ran into people. We have people in our Senate right now who I know, who basically started off super young and said, "Yep, this is what I want to be for a living. I want to be a professional politician. I'm going to be your state rep or senator or whatever from now until the time you pry me out of office." And that, quite honestly, it's scary to me. I don't want people who want to be professional. I want people who have a job. They want to get back to their job. They want to get it done. They want to get the work of the people done and then go back to their regular lives. And unfortunately, that dynamic over the last 100, especially the last 100 years, has changed completely. These people are all about doing this professionally. And unfortunately, the institutional knowledge, the insider knowledge that they have, the power from behind the scenes, things we don't even know or understand as outsiders, has given them the opportunity to play this game to this, this grandmaster level. The rest of us are like kindergartners playing against a grandmaster. And it's unfortunate. This seems to be the only solution to that.
Yeah. Yep. And so, unfortunately, we really wished that we could get this in the Constitution. And unfortunately, an initiative by the people cannot go into the Constitution, which is a darn shame. However, if passed, this I really will help the problem. So currently there's 16 states that have enacted term limits on state legislators. And just the most recent one was in January of this year, 2023, North Dakota. They enacted state term limits, and they did very similar language as the one that we did, or the initiative that we wrote up. And combined, I was looking at some numbers a couple months ago, and even before North Dakota, combined, some of these other states that have had term limits in for a while, they have term limited over 5,000 state legislators combined in these 15 other states. So that's 5,000 people that would have kept going if they didn't get stopped by their people saying, "Oh, no, we want term limits." And that's something that I really think can help our people in the state as well, is especially with the fiscal spending.
Right. Well, fresh blood and fresh ideas is good, even if the people in those areas send back somebody who's appears to be a clone of the one that's currently in there. There will be at least some fresh ideas that come out of that. I mean, right? At least it will force the people to think, instead of just rubber stamping, "Oh, this guy's been here, he's been good, we'll just keep going on." At least it will force people to think a little bit more and give again some fresh bloods, some fresh ideas, and a new starting point for many of these people, so that nobody gathers too much power unto themselves. I mean, because we see now, I mean, we've been talking the last few years about how there's a handful of people in the legislature that seem to control everything because of longevity and knowledge and everything else. And now it's not even just a handful. We've got like 3 or 4 people that are basically controlling 60 with their behaviors and their attitudes. And that's this is the only way to stop it at this point, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So honestly, I feel like the two initiatives, this one as well as getting rid of ranked choice voting, I think these two things, if passed, and if we can get these on our ballot, this will help our state more than any one person getting elected is going to help, or even two or three, these two things, getting back to a primary where we don't have fake conservatives running that have, like in my last race, someone who we had no Democrat in our race. And so someone who was definitely not a conservative, in my opinion, not even a Republican, who runs and has half of their support or more, that's, Democrats voting for them. Working with Democrats is fine, but voting like Democrats when you're elected by, Republicans is not
Right.
fine, or saying that you're a Republican and then you vote like a Democrat. And joining right away and giving more power to the opposite party right after you take office is it's dishonest. It's dishonest with people of the state of Alaska. And that's exactly what happened in the Senate. You had people that were unwilling to work with other Republicans. They shoved 3 of them in a closet, and they gave the power, there was 8 of them, and ended up giving the power to 9, and so anyways, they held more or less positions than the other side. And so it's like, working with the other side, that's not a problem. Giving them the power right when the Republicans elected you, that is the dishonesty. And that's the thing where I feel like the longer and longer that you're in office, and I've seen this, and you have, and many of us in the state have, you get out of touch with your people that elected you.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Absolutely. Hold the line here. Don't go anywhere. We're coming up on the break. We got more coming up. Elijah Verhagen is our guest. We're going to talk more about their initiative to create term limits for the state legislature. We'll return with more in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
What is that?
Common Sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Elijah Verhagen is our guest. The Michael Duke Show continues. We're in the break right now. I got to ask you, Elijah, I mean, it is the same question that I asked Kevin earlier during the break, which was, how much of this can be laid at the feet of the party? I mean, the party in the state of Alaska, the Republican Party is what I'm talking about specifically, is so dysfunctional. I mean, you've got, in your race specifically, you've got a candidate who's censured by his own district, who is, the leadership of his district is unhappy with the behavior, with the performance, everything else, censured, and yet at the same time, Republican leadership breaks him off a big chunk of money to run, against another Republican candidate who has got the bona fides, and it blows my mind how much it can be laid at the feet of the party, and how much does the Republican Party need to get their own house in order in this state, aside from the whole term limit thing. I mean, shouldn't that also be an angle of attack that Republicans are taking in this state?
Absolutely. It was frustrating is an understatement, but talking with, our current party chair and others that literally gave, without them even asking, gave my opponent, gave Gary Stevens, others that did not need the money, and treated the Republican Party just as a means to an end in some aspects, and then they gave them money, and not only money, but like a decent chunk of money. It was shameful, outright shameful, especially with local districts. We're always talking in our party about grassroots and, how great that is. And that is true. But when the top leadership of the state completely ignores the will of the local districts, steamrolls us, and the person that's been endorsed, or the people that have been endorsed by their local, districts and et cetera, and they're fighting for that person. And the top leaders are like, we don't want to rock the boat. We want to help these, people that are completely have disregard compared to our platform, our policies, don't come to any of our events, anything. We're gonna just, give them money and completely ignore, actually tell me and others, you have to work for our approval, for us to give you some money, even though the SEC endorsed me, even though our local districts endorsed me, and not my opponent. You have to go prove yourself before we give you any money. We're going to give it to your opponent who didn't even ask, who doesn't need it. It's completely broken. And we need more people. When you're talking, please tell people to please get involved, run for their district chairs, run for state Republican offices. It's a lot of work. And it's a lot of, you don't get much gratitude or it's a thankless job.
Right. But there's no kudos and accolades for doing all that stuff.
Yeah. But we have some great district chairs that I know of, wonderful ones. And then we have a lot of not so great people running the state Republican Party in our, and it's just, man, it's beyond frustrating. And so absolutely doing what we can to get more people involved in their Republican districts to then go to the state convention and replace who we have would be great.
Yeah, I mean, there needs to be a revolution inside of the Republican Party in this state. It seems like the district chairs are all, doing God's work down in the trenches, so to speak, at the grassroots level, and most of them are, and it seems like the statewide leadership is all basically giving all the districts the finger and saying, well, we don't care what you think because we know better than you. I mean, they're all at that point serving, they're suffering from the politician's disease. That's exactly it's like giving Mike Shower's opponent money. Shower's the incumbent. Is it, this is just, it's an ongoing problem that I think needs to be addressed by Republicans in this state. That's 100%. All right, 20 seconds out. Going to rejoin here. Elijah Verhagen is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Please like and share this no matter where you're looking at it. Follow the show page on Facebook. Subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube. Let's get to it, shall we? Right now.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Yep, the show. That's me, Michael Dukes. Joining me this morning, Elijah Verhagen, former candidate for state senate, now one of the authors of a citizens initiative to create state term limits and here in the state of Alaska. And we're continuing on this path here now, talking with him about the genesis of that and where it goes from here. Elijah, a couple of questions. One of the questions from the chat room that I saw after you just kind of lined out, kind of what the language is of it and everything else. The big question, 12 years, have to take a 6-year break. Then they're allowed 8 more years, and then they're done. The question is, will current legislators be grandfathered in? Or at the end of their term, if they've served the 20 years plus, will they be out at that point? What's the language dealing with that?
So, and I don't know if you were able to attach the actual language I sent you earlier or not for people to read, but maybe you could put it in the comments or the chat. But yes, so we purposely wrote it to where once the effective date is, enacted with this, legislators who are currently holding office can finish their term and then they will be ineligible. So if they had already served 12 years, once this takes effect, they'll finish that term and then they will have to take their 6-year break. If they've already been at 20 years, then at that point, they'll finish their term and then they will be ineligible to run or be appointed to office. And of course, we did that on purpose because that's the whole problem, right? Is we don't want someone to be able to restart the clock and go 20 years more when they've already been in there 20 years, heaven forbid. And yet we've had politicians that have been in there, not our state legislature, but we've had, some politicians we know of in Alaska that have been in there a long time in certain offices. So, yes, absolutely. We have it to where it's written as having served or already have served. They will finish the term they're in, and then they will be ineligible to run again. So, some people have asked me in the past, they've said, elections are term limits. No, elections are not term limits. It would be great if they were, but they're really not. And here's why. You have someone who's been in there for sometimes as few as 4 years, but especially those that have been in there in the 12 plus year range, they wield a lot of power with their committee assignments. They are well known. They have a ton of name recognition. They have the party, both parties, Republican and Democrat, sometimes, in my opinion, and from my observations and dealings, they have, and me and Michael were just talking about this in the break, they have the parties kind of beaten into submission or in an abusive relationship, in my opinion, to where the parties are giving these career politicians funds and money that sometimes they don't even need, they didn't even ask for, they disregard the party that they're from, and the party leadership at the top is still giving them money. And that is a completely unfair advantage to any person who wants to run for office. And I don't care who it is. I would love to see more of a citizen legislature to where people are changing out more often, bringing more ideas to the table. Not, I've been here for 12 years, I've been here for 20 years, this is how it's done. That is wrong. We, as the people, are governed by the people, not governed by the career politicians. It shouldn't be that way. Another thing, businesses have been scared of funding new people because all the APOC donations, of course, that's all visible public knowledge. That's good. But if they fund a new person, even if they really think that new person's going to do well and has great ideas, they fund the new person, the incumbent sees that. If they win, boom, that business or that industry or whatever could be given less money or not talked to or treated poorly by the incumbents because, wow, you gave my opponent in the race money. And therefore, in this last race, I was able to meet with a lot of different groups. Some of them gave me money. They were really impressed. My opponent didn't even ever get back with them, didn't even talk to them. And they gave him money because they didn't want to be shut in the closet. They wanted, just in case I didn't win, even though they really liked what I had to say and all these other things, they give me money and then they give the exact same amount to my opponent who did nothing, didn't ask for it, didn't need it. And at that point, they might as well not have given money to either of us because you give two people $500 and it cancels each other out, right? So when people say elections are term limits, no, not really, because of all of the
you're speaking to the power of the incumbency, right? I mean, that's the power of the incumbency. It's baked into the system. That's this is like you said, you don't want to alienate everybody, so you give everybody money. It doesn't make any sense. You're covering all your bases at that point, but the power of the incumbency trumps all at that point.
Yeah. And so that has really, really, especially fiscally, in my opinion, damaged our state. Look at the cuts that our state Senate just made. They got everything they wanted, by the way. And look at the cuts they've made. They didn't make any cuts except for to your PFD and the people's money, right? And everything else, they increased the BSA. They gave themselves raises. All these other things. They tempted some House members with $35 million. Well, what about all the billions that they were able to, put into where they wanted it?
Right.
That is the power of, people ask me, well, why do these people want to stay career politicians? Is it for the money? And I'm like, I don't really think it's for the salaries. No, I mean, yeah, now they're trying to increase it even more, but really that's not like they're getting, in my opinion, super rich off of, their salary. No, but the power that they get to hold, they get pretty much any assignment they want when they've been in there for 20 years. They get to take and direct billions of dollars how they want it.
Sure.
And then this time they don't even actually work with the other body. I mean, how, like, that is just very poor sportsmanship and working with the other side. They completely screwed the House, and not just the House, but the people. And for that level of arrogance, that needs to be switched out. And if the people, again, that I don't blame anyone for not wanting to run against some of these incumbents. You get called all sorts of horrible names. It is very stressful night and day. You're away from your family. All my district was so big. You're on road trips all the time, and then you lose to someone who sometimes is barely even trying, but they have this war chest of money outraised in money by 5 times. There's name recognition. It is very hard for people to change out some of these players, and so therefore I think term limits, as well as getting rid of the rigged ranked choice voting that clearly favors not the passionate people. I was at this event with Kelly Chewbacca in Fairbanks the other day, who signed my petition, which is awesome. And every person I talked to at that event, every person signed this initiative. We only need 100 signatures for it to go to, and I think we're already there, but to get turned back into lieutenant governor. Then they print the booklets, and they're going to send us back, the thousands of signatures that we need in the booklets. But I was at this event, and Kelly was talking about how, we put up these candidates, and then we have sometimes the parties that are giving money to their opponents, even if the candidates are, or endorsed, and their opponents aren't. You have ranked choice voting, which is clearly rigged to not help the passionate conservative or even maybe liberal people get elected. It's really to help the moderates, and that's not good. She asked the question, who would we rather have in Congress? A bunch of Aaron Burrs or a bunch of Hamiltons? Hamilton, he had some out there ideas, but he was passionate. Aaron Burr tried to please everyone, and who remembers Aaron Burr? Who has statues or plays of Aaron Burr? No, he was the bad guy that, shot Hamilton. But we need people that are passionate. We don't need people that try to cover their bases, go right down the middle. Change happens when we have people that are invested in Alaska, that are passionate about their constituents and want to do a good job, not just sit in there, wield power for year after year after year, and sometimes not even live in their district.
Change comes from the edges, right? I mean, that's really where change comes from, not from the middle, not from the moderate, not from the business as usual crowd. Change comes from the edges, whether it's left or right, and that's what happens. Elijah, the booklets you're saying right now, you've collected the signatures or are collecting the signatures to get the booklets printed. Walk us through the process. Where are we at right now?
Yep. So we have our 3 prime sponsors, which again was myself, Heath Smith from Homer, and Trevor Shaw from Ketchikan. We have to only collect 100 signatures. These are kind of sponsor signatures, they call them, but really it's just showing that there's enough support for this to go statewide. And so we needed 100. We're going to blow it out of the water and, just get 140, which has not been hard. I got 35 signatures in one night. In 1 hour, really. And so anyways, we're going to get about 140 because they have to screen through them and make sure. And so then they'll have 2 months. The Lieutenant Governor's office has 2 months and they don't have to take 2 months. And we're hoping that they won't, but they have 2 months to make a decision. Then at that point, they will tell us yes or no. And then they'll start printing the booklets. Many of you have signed probably the ranked choice voting repeal booklets. They're a green booklet. They're going around statewide. If you haven't gotten the chance, I have one. Many others have one. Let us know if you want to sign. And that's to get it back on the ballot so we can get rid of ranked choice voting. But this will be the same thing. So once it's done, we need a total of, it's 10% of the people that voted in the last district to get it on the statewide ballot, which comes out to 26,704. And so, of course, you want to get a couple thousand extra just in case some of the signatures, people have moved or, are ineligible or whatever. And then you have a full year to collect those signatures. So hopefully this will get back to us by the end of July, early August. And then we're going to, we have a lot of volunteers. Anyone who would like a booklet, please contact me or Heath or Trevor, or go through Michael and try to contact us. But at that point, we'll be giving out these booklets statewide. We need to collect, again, 10% of the people that voted in the last election. That equates to 7% from each district, state house district, or just a certain percentage of 75% of the districts. So some of the districts that might be a little harder to get to, the rural ones or something. I'm in a rural district. My district won't have any problem. We only need District 36 only needs 557 signatures. I know we easily surpassed that with the ranked choice voting repeal signatures, and I know we will with term limits as well. But anyway, so then each district will be keeping track of this, but we need a certain percentage of each, or of 75% of the districts. So
Right.
Again, maybe if there's people up in Utiagvik that want to get this going, that's great. However, we don't have to go to the harder districts if we don't, if there's not as much interest out there. So anyways, we have a full year to gain those signatures. And so we'll be doing parties and barbecues and all these things. And really, it doesn't take super long to come and sign something,
Right.
So
No,
luckily
exactly.
it goes quick.
But it's still a heavy lift. I mean, it's still a heavy lift to get all those signatures. So you got to get it done. And that's the most difficult part of it. Elijah, how do folks get a hold of you? Give me your final, we're wrapping up here. Give me your final thoughts here, and how do folks get a hold of you?
Yeah. So if you can maybe write this in the thing, my email is just my name run together, Elijah Verhagen, all lowercase, run together @gmail.com. So Elijah Verhagen @gmail.com. You can email me. And then also I have a Facebook page. It's Elijah Verhagen for Alaska. So message me on there, or send me a friend request to my personal page if you want. But would love help. We need to gather some troops that want the booklets, and then we'll be able to start gathering these signatures. It is going to be a lot of work, but at the same time, again, I have yet to talk to one person about this that hasn't been willing to sign, and that's some of my liberal friends as well. One of my liberal friends helped me with some of the language and totally supported term limits.
Yeah. No, I think this is a bipartisan issue, and I think it would be good to see. Maybe they could carry two booklets, the RCV and the term limits at the same time.
That's what I'm doing. Yep. Yeah.
Nothing stopping you from doing that. Elijah Verhagen, our guest, thank you so much for coming on board and joining us today. We appreciate you being part of it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're up against it. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Elijah Verhagen finishing up with us here. I want to thank you to him for being part of it with us today. Good discussion. I mean, I think if anything else is proven there is that power is one hell of a drug. We'll give Elijah the final, we'll give him a final bite at this apple, so to speak. I got to push a million buttons here. So Elijah, your final thoughts here as we get ready to wrap up with you.
Yeah, I just appreciate you having me on. Really, we can sit and be frustrated with politics, which happens to me daily, and do nothing, or we can get involved. And so, man, there's so many battles that I've fought in politics and lost, and many a time you feel like giving up. But if we give up, what's the alternative? We keep on getting ruled by corrupt people that don't have our interests at heart. And so staying involved or getting involved is the most crucial thing. We had the lowest voter turnout that we've had in 30 years in Alaska this last go around. and that's sad. And I think, and this was part of the presentation Kelly did as well. I think many people did not like ranked choice voting. It was confusing, and so I think that's a big part of the problem. But also, so many people say, it doesn't even matter. My vote doesn't even matter.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the people don't represent me anyways, or I elect a Republican or a Democrat and they vote the same way. Well, that's sadly true sometimes in our state. And so, but your vote does matter. We were under 50% by a decent amount in some districts. And so really staying involved, bare minimum voting, but getting involved, I think will definitely help. When the legislature, that was one thing I wanted to say. People have said, well, the legislature has a term limits bill. Didn't you see that? And I'm like, yeah, some freshman legislators on both sides, which I think is great, came together and they put, not near strict, but they put a state term limits resolution out there that if passed by the legislature would go on the state ballot. And I said, do you think the people at the top, the Bert Stedmans and the Stevens and the Click Bishops, do you think they would ever allow this to pass their gate? Heck no. They won't.
Yeah.
And so that bill is dead in the water. And so we have to take action by the people if we want to get these things done. Most of the other term limits that have passed in other states were by initiative by the people. They weren't legislators putting it on themselves. In fact, 2 states, the legislators had the gall to shoot down after it was already enacted, which they have to get a high percentage. I think it's the 3/4, but they actually took away what the people put on them. And that, wow, I really hope those people revolted and did not reelect some of those people that did that years back. But most of them have stayed in contact. And most of the states have kept their term limits once passed. And I really do think that our state can tremendously benefit from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, are the lunatics running the asylum? You think they're going to hand the keys over willingly to the guards and the nurses? No, that's not going to happen. And that's what we have here. They've got the fox in the hen house, and they don't want to be kicked out. So yeah, you're never going to see that pass at a legislative level here in the state of Alaska, anyway, based on everything that's happened so far. Well, we wish you the best of luck, and we hope to hear from you. How long until these booklets could get printed? I mean, once you turn in the 100 signatures, how long does it take, do you think?
So we're planning to turn them in early next week, and then they have up to 2 months. They have to, make a decision before then. So, August is probably the earliest, early August. But again, they could, and some, they've approved it sooner than 2 months. So we're hoping. But yeah, we plan to turn it in next week, early next week, and then hopefully have them by August.
And this only affects the House, right? This is nothing else. This is only the legislature. It only affects the legislature. Governor already has his own term limit set. So this is just for the legislature. Yeah.
Yep. Just for the legislature.
All right. Well, Elijah Verhagen, thank you for doing all the hard work. We appreciate it. As I said previously, power is one hell of a drug, and we need to basically stop the supply. That's what needs to happen here. So thank you for coming on board and being part of it today. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Elijah Verhagen, our guest here on the program. All right. We're about a minute out here from rejoining the radio, getting ready to get things rolling on. And we'll I don't know. I'm going to pontificate here for a bit before we run out the clock for tomorrow. I think Elijah again was a great candidate. He's a good guy. He does a lot of hard work, and what happened to him in that district was, I got to say, nothing short of criminal when it was all said and done. And a lot of that goes right back at the feet of the Republican Party. Now, I'm not a Republican, and I've never been a Republican, although I've identified with them in many ways and in many causes and in many, we're in common cause, I guess I should say, in total. But the Republican Party has got a huge amount of responsibility in the situation that we're seeing right now. It's so frustrating. Let's talk about that. Up next, The Michael Duke Show. Okay. Final segment here on the program. And I guess we're going to revisit the topics from today. Is this a heavy lift? Is it a heavy lift to get ranked choice voting or to get term limits on the ballots and to get them to pass? Absolutely. Is there a possibility? Absolutely. It can be done. I agree with Elijah's point, and I don't know if it was during the break or during the radio broadcast, but he was talking about the lowest turnout. I mean, the lowest turnout in 30 years. And quite honestly, I think it's because many people, I think some of it was ranked choice voting. I think there was a lot of confusion on that. Now, I agree that ranked choice voting in its mean is not that hard to understand if you took the time to look at it and understand it. We tried to explain it on the show many, many times. But for many people who are not politically motivated, who are not into politics or into what's going on, they were just like, oh, too confusing, and they threw their hands up. But I also think there's a huge selection of section of people who basically have just given up because they're tired of the whole left-right dichotomy. Maybe they're tired of the divisiveness and the polarization in the politics in America. Maybe they're just frustrated. They're tired. Or maybe they feel, as he said, that they just like that their vote doesn't matter, that what they say doesn't matter. Maybe that's why, people like us who are smaller government people, smaller government conservatives, Republicans, libertarians, unaffiliateds, whatever, who believe in more of the small and more limited government. Maybe that's why we've fallen into a smaller and smaller minority, because many people who've been, like I said, I've been talking about this stuff for 20 years. 20 years. And it is frustrating. It is disheartening to see the same things, the things that you warn about, the things that you discuss and talk about. It's frustrating to see those things, not be able to affect that kind of change. It's very, very frustrating. And again, the circular kind of firing squad thing as well, where somebody doesn't do things exactly the way that you want to do, and so you basically want to burn their house down verbally or whatever. That's not helping as well. It's just Elijah, for those of you on the radio who couldn't see, Elijah was in his car and there were people like, is he homeless? Is he homeless? No. He said he's in his car outside of his house because he was trying not to wake up his kids and his wife because he talks loud. He's like, I'm a family man and we need these types of people involved in politics. That's the kind of snide remarks you get because, he's doing this from his car. Well, so what? But we have a tendency, here's why the Democrats continue to win. Here's why the progressives across America, and here in Alaska, it's not the Democrats really that are running the show. It's more the big government folks, which include a bunch of Republicans. But overall, if you won't know why the progressives have done so well in America, it's because for the most part, they don't snipe inwards. Right? They don't snipe inwards. And we are, again, because and this is what I've talked about in the past, the difference between conservatives and liberals, or progressives and whatever labels you want to throw on there, is that one is very much a communal, part of the crowd. It takes a village, folks, they're all willing to work together, and all the folks who are mostly on the right are more rugged individualists. I don't play well with others. I mean, that's how I am. I mean, I get along with people, don't get me wrong, but when I'm doing something, I want to be in charge. I want to be the guy that's making things happen. I want to do that kind of stuff. And so it's the whole idea of we just, we're rugged individualists, and we're so individual sometimes that we forget that we're all trying to pull together in the same direction. But this whole thing with ranked choice voting, the whole thing with the term limits, the whole thing with trying to make things, these are important things, folks, and we should be out there pulling it. We should be trying to re-engage those people who have thrown their hands up in the air and wandered off in the pucker brush. That's the problem. We need to re-engage those people. We need to show, we need to give, and we need to give them a win. We need to give them a win. So maybe if we are able to create, have a petition and a proposition, an initiative on the ballot for term limits, maybe that's a win. Maybe that engages more people. If we're able to get ranked choice voting, a proposition to repeal it on the ballot, maybe that's a win. Maybe that engages more people to say, oh, well, maybe we can fix this. But even if we can't, we've still got to engage those people and say, we still need your help. Because otherwise it'll be fewer and fewer people participating. And then you know what'll happen. The special interests will basically win the day because they're the only ones that are motivated through self-interest to go out and do things. That's where we're at right now. It is frustrating. I've been talking about it a lot lately. The whole, doing this show for so long, saying the same thing over and over, getting the thrill, quote unquote, of saying, I told you so. This is what was going to happen. It doesn't do anything for me. I just want more and more people to open up their eyes to see where this is ultimately taking us. Even the people who told Kevin McCabe, thank you for voting for the budget, we needed that, they need to look at this with fresh eyes and look and realize where this leads us down the road. Here's where it leads us to, folks. Final thoughts for the day. It leads us to a state that lives beyond its means. It leaves us to a PFD that is going to be gone in just from a handful of months to maybe 4 years, 5 years. It leads us to more taxation. Once they tax the PFD out of existence, then they'll have to have another form of tax to do it because, to pay for all their big idea spending. And it leads us to the point to where government reigns supreme in every aspect of the economy in the state of Alaska. The private economy then becomes permanently subservient to the public economy. I wish more people could think long-term that way, but it's 1 year to the next, or they don't even think about it till election day, and then they vote, and then they forget about it for another year. It's, it is what it is. We cannot stop fighting. That's my thought. Don't stop, never stopping. All right, folks, out of time. We will see you tomorrow. God, I didn't realize Harold was a comedian. Politicians are honest and stick to their promises. You're all just naive. And Brian disagrees with me. He says, no, it's already subservient. I think in many ways you're right. I think it will become permanently subservient. There will be no way of getting out from underneath of it. The private economy will become permanently subservient to the public economy. Okay. Well, folks, I know a lot of you are all bent out of shape at Kevin. At least Kevin is willing to come on and talk about these things. You say a lot of things. I might have disagreed with him on this vote, but as of right now, he's still the best candidate in my district, and if the vote was held tomorrow, I would still vote for him versus somebody else. So, deal with it. We'll move on. We're going to move on to the next one. And maybe he'll think about my words the next time a vote like this comes up. I don't know. We can only do our best at this point. I'm hoping the sun comes out today. That's what I need, just a little bit of sunshine. All right, folks. Thanks for coming in. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.